Good afternoon or good morning, everybody, to those of you in the USA and the West Coast, or west of the world where I am. Thanks for joining me today. Today we're going to be looking at tethered workflow. So improving your workflow from setting up Capture One, acquiring the picture, of course, and then exporting as well. We're going to be in particular looking at file management within a session, more on that in a second, but sessions in Capture One work particularly nicely for shooting tethered. For those of you on YouTube, hello, thanks for joining us. For those of you in our webinar room, if you would like to ask a question, you can do so in the Q&A tab. That just helps separate the questions out from the chat, but please don't feel that you can't chat amongst yourselves as well. If you'd like to have a bit more real estate, then you can hide that panel on the right hand side and then you'll have more space on screen. And as I said, those of you who are on YouTube or indeed Facebook as well, if you'd like to ask a question, please go ahead and do so. You can just tap a question into the comments and that will come straight through to me as well. So that is the plan for today. Now, before we get to looking at Capture One, so we've got Capture One up and running, ready to start with our tethered shoot. I've got a basic setup which you can just about see beside me. Today is not an instruction in still life photography, so still life photographers, please forgive me for the abomination that you're going to see, but it's more just to get something into Capture One. So definitely not a lesson on photography today. Okay, so before we get to Capture One, I'm just going to mention a couple of things about connectivity. So we're going to shoot with USB cable today, connecting via USB. Also in Capture One, you can connect wirelessly if you're on a Sony camera or a Canon camera, or I should say compatible models of Sony and Canon cameras. We are working on bringing a few more manufacturers online with that as well, but more about that in the future too. It's a bit difficult for me to show you wireless tethering because I need the network for wireless transmission, of course. So to try and hook up a wireless camera and live stream at the same time is pretty difficult. So what we do is we put a comment, pin a comment below this recording on YouTube once it's ready with some resources on wireless setup as well. So let's talk about USB before we get to Capture One. So generally, 99.9% of the problems which we hear about, I'm not getting consistent connection, or my connection is slow, or the connection keeps dropping out, or I can't connect at all, is down to this guy, the USB cable. So not all USB cables are equal. So it's important that you get a decent USB cable and that you also observe the theoretical limits of the length of the USB cable. Now you can push those limits, but it's important to know the safe limits. So this is a cable from Tethered Tools. We'll talk about other manufacturers in a minute. I've got just a little cheapo standard cable here, so you can see the difference in gauge or thickness between those two cables. So just because you can buy a long cheap cable for not much money doesn't mean that you should use it or trust it to tether your important camera with. So that one, not fit for purpose. This one from Tethered Tools works great. You can also see, this is the cable that I've got my Sony A7R currently connected to the host computer, and you can see also the gauge in that one is pretty chunky as well. That's a USB-C cable. So that's got a much higher data rate than this older, whatever this is, micro B USB cable. So cable is important, quality of cable length is important. So USB-C in theory has a maximum of 3 meters, but you might be able to push that. USB 3 in theory has a maximum length of 4.5 meters, but you might be able to push that as well. But just keep in mind those limitations. Another thing which we also hear about a lot in terms of connectivity is also securing, if you like. Let's just bring up this screen for a second, is securing the cable to the camera. So here's Tethered Tools. So they make cables, they make lots of tethering accessories, great company, worth exploring their website. You can see here, or let's just bring up my little mouse locating application. So you can see here, this is another product Tether tools make called a jerk stopper, which just stops the cable having too much, if you like, weight off the port off the side of the camera. Can be very expensive to fix USB ports on the side of cameras, so if you can take some of that strain off, that works well. There's a couple of other products that I was going to show you. So this is also from Tether Tools, just a tether plate. I'll demo with a short cable. So the idea of this is that you wedge your cable into this channel, and then that fixes to the bottom of the camera, and that takes all the strain off the port on the side of the camera, because essentially it's going to be connected like this. So that's a great little accessory. That's also Arca plate compatible at the bottom. The only sort of disadvantage with this really is that when you want to, take the camera away and pack the camera off, then of course it's got the cable attached to it, so you need to unscrew your plate. I just got this accessory literally just plopped through the letterbox before we started. So this is the Photo Fortress. So it's similar principle to the one that you just looked at from Tether Tools, but this bit pops out. So what we can do then is jam our cable inside and then attach this, secure it, and then you've got the same principle that this would go on the bottom of the camera. This would then connect into the side of your camera, but the nice thing is you can just leave that plate on your camera, pop that out, and away you go. So that's the Photo Fortress. I bought that from my buddy Lamonas of LS Digi, and he also sells cables from Area 51, which is also another great brand for cables. So check out Tether Tools. Check out, you can see that little gadget here, Photo Fortress, also available in the US as far as I'm aware. But anything you can do to help protect that somewhat, fragile connection on the side of your camera is going to save you money in the future. All right, let's go ahead and look at what we're going to do in Capture One. Just checking for questions. I think we're all good at the moment. Yes, we are. So in Capture One, we're going to use a session. Now, Capture One, you've got session file management and you've got catalog file management, two different things. Okay, sessions were designed 25 plus years ago when Phase One as a company first started up, because Phase One built cameras, but there was no software commercially available on the market to get the pictures from the camera to your computer. So the session workflow was born out of a desire to create a really good workflow for a tethered shoot. So I'm going to use the session workflow today, and then you should see where the benefits lie, not just in your own workflow, but in tethered workflow in general. So what we're going to do is set that up from scratch, and we're going to go through that whole workflow. And what we're going to do is quite a little bit of setup at the start, and you might be thinking, my goodness, this seems a lot of things I need to set up before I can actually start tethered shooting. But the goal is here is that we're going to save all of this as a template, which means you can do all the setup that we're going to do over the next few minutes in one single click. So for thereafter, it's going to be a much, much faster workflow. So I'm going to close this catalog down. Let's say not now, and we're going to say File, New Session, and we're going to call this Tethered PM. Pay attention to what you call your session, because we're going to use the name of this session in sorry, I just need to cancel something on this screen. We're going to use the name of this session as part of our naming convention for our photos. So don't just call this something like shoot or whatever. Actually give it an intelligent name that relates to the job you're doing, your client, and so on. So let's say okay with that. So now we've got our session set up. What does a session look like if you've never seen one before? It looks like, if we go to my pictures folder, it looks like this. So it has a capture folder, an output folder, a selects folder, and a trash folder. And the most basic workflow session involves with shooting to the capture folder, moving to the selects folder, your best pictures, the ones you want to keep from the shoot. When you export to JPEGs and TIFFs and so on, they go to the output folder. And the trash folder has all the stuff that you're going to delete. So that is the most simple, basic session workflow that you can do. Capture to capture, export to output, good stuff goes in selects, bad stuff goes in trash, if we want to simplify it. Now those 4 different folders you can see are selectable from the library tool here. But as most of you are probably going to do something a bit more sophisticated than that, we're going to expand out from that basic workflow and do something which is more relatable to probably how you're going to work. And that could be shooting into more than one capture folder. So let's say you're going to do 5 different fashion looks in a day, or 10 headshots, or 3 different product shots. You might not want them all jumbled together in the same capture folder, so we can divide that up. And also when it comes to the selects folder, I'm not going to use that. We're going to do something a bit more intelligent with smart albums. So before we start anything else, I'm going to make a couple of new folders in here. So I'm going to make one called lighting test. So this is when you're setting up for the shoot, you're dialing in the composition, you're dialing in the lighting. You don't want to fill up an actual shoot folder with all this test material. So that's going to go in a place by itself. Then I'm going to make a folder called shot 1, and then I'm going to make a folder called shot 2, because today we're going to do 2 different shots. If I was going to do more shots, I could make more folders. Now, right now, the only folders that Capture One is aware of are these 4 standard basic session folders. So it doesn't know I've made these. These don't exist in Capture One's brain at the moment. So what we need to do is select these and drag them to session favorites. Now Capture One is aware that these folders exist. Small difference between Mac and PC is that on a PC you'll have to press this little plus button and then go and tell Capture One this is a favorite. So that's just a slight different from Mac and PC. Otherwise Mac you can drag and drop into session favorites. So that's the kind of folders that we want to do. So the next thing that we want to do is also set up some session albums. So when we have done our shoot and we want to pick the best pictures, we're going to set up so that we're ready for that as well. And again, this is something which will all happen automatically on the next time you shoot, because we're going to save all of this as a template. So we're going to go to our session albums and we're going to make a new smart album. And helps if you press the button, David. That's strange. Where's my window disappeared to? New smart album. Okay. Capture One just having a little moment there. So let's do a good old turn it off and on again and say new smart album. That's strange. I'm just checking I'm not being a complete idiot and missing that. But I don't think I am. Let's try album. Okay. New smart album. Maybe I wasn't. There we go. Maybe I was just being clumsy with my pen. Who knows? Live anxiety. Okay, so I'm going to make a smart album, and a smart album populates itself based on its search criteria. So this could be a color tag, it could be a star rating, it could be a combination, it could be a whole bunch of different criteria that we can search under. But I'm going to keep it nice and simple. These are my first picks. And these are any photo which has a green tag on it, or a gren tag, like so. And we're going to use a preset, and we're going to say if the color tag is green, it's going to live in this folder automatically. So any picture that we shoot that has a green tag is going to arrive in this collection automatically. So that's one smart album. Then I'm going to make another one, see if it works this time. It does, which is going to be my final picks. The pictures that we know are good that we want to send to our client, so the finished ones. And this is going to be a green tag, and it's also going to be 5 stars. So it's got 2 criteria that have to be met. So it's going to be a green tag, and we're going to say plus the rating equals 5 stars. And all of those things must match. So it can't just be a green tag. It can't just be 5 stars. Both of those things have to match. So let's say okay. So we've got our album set up, we've got our session favorites set up. Next thing we need to do is sort out the name of our pictures. So how are we going to name our pictures? Now we could just leave it on the default, but it's not particularly smart and it doesn't give you very unique names. So over in our Tether tool tab, this is all the things related to tether capture. So I'm going to grab next capture naming. I'll pull it out so it's a bit bigger and easier for you to see. And up here under format, you see these little gray bars. These are what we call in Capture One tokens. So a token refers to some kind of metadata about the photo or about something in Capture One or about today's date as another example. So it's pulling out bits of useful metadata to build you an intelligent naming convention. So the default uses the name of the session, which is put in automatically here, and it also uses a camera counter, which could be the numbering system which your camera is currently spitting out. Now I don't think this is a great default, so we're going to delete that, and we're going to press this button right here, and we're going to choose some other tokens. The first thing I'm going to pick is the document name. That is the name of our session, okay? Which is why I said when you name your session, call it something useful and intelligent, not just studio shoot or a shoot. Give it a proper name because we can use it in our naming convention. Next, we're going to have our collection name. That's the name of the folder that we're shooting into, which could be lighting test, it could be shot 1, it could be shot 2. Those folders, let's say you're going to do a bunch of headshots at a corporate entity. If you know the names of who you're going to shoot, you could set those names up beforehand, so you could shoot directly into the folder. And now we need to have a counter, because otherwise it's not going to be unique. By default, the counter is 1 digit, but that's not very many, so let's make it 4 digits. And to be able to see, you know, this a bit clearer, we're going to put a little hyphen in between each one, like so. So now we've got our naming convention, like so, and look at how this works. So let's just go back to my library. If I go to lighting test, you can see the naming convention is Tether PM, lighting test, and a counter. When we figure out our lighting and my amazing composition behind me, we're going to switch to shot 1, and you see automatically the naming convention updates. Why is that useful? Because it takes the human error out of the equation. It means you don't have to remember to change your naming when you switch to the next shot. It will save you having to rename afterwards. Your mind is full of lots of other things to do aside from this boring stuff in Capture One about naming and folders and stuff. So the more that you can automate, the better it is for you and your efficiency and working fluidly with clients and so on. So let's pop next capture naming away. And the last thing we need to do before we can take a picture, hooray, I hear you say, is to define which of these folders we want to be our capture folder. Because if I take a picture now, what's going to happen is that it's going to go into this folder, capture, and it will sit here. So we need to tell Capture One, look, we don't want to use the default capture folder, we want to use this one. And all I need to do is right click and say set as capture folder. And as soon as I do that, you'll see a little camera icon appear next to it. So this is now my capture folder. So as soon as I take a picture, that's when my first photo is going to arrive. Now we did quite a lot there. We set up some folders, we set up some smart albums, we changed our naming convention, we made a session. So that was quite a lot of work to do. Something which you would not want to repeat each time you came to a session, a capture session. So as I said, once we've been through our shooting workflow, we'll save this as a template so that we can do all of this automatically. Good question from David. He says, how do you reset the counter to say 4,000? So if you look in your next capture naming, there's a little 3 dots up here, which is just hiding under your name, David. So let's get rid of that. There's 3 dots here, next capture naming. So if we tap on that, you'll see reset capture counter, which sets it to 0. And you'll see an option that says set capture counter. So if you want to start at 4000, David, you can just set it there. Now, if you don't want to pull it out of that menu, you can go into File, and you will find a whole bunch of counter related options in there, all of which you could set a keyboard shortcut for. So if you want a shortcut to reset your counter, set one up. If you want a shortcut to set the counter to a certain number, set that up. When we switch between our different capture folders, we'll come back to this discussion and talk about whether it makes sense to reset each time or just let the numbers flow between their different folders. Okay, any questions over here, webinar side of things? Is there an issue with Canon 5D cameras with the latest version? Not that I know. Need to be a bit more specific, Glyn, in terms of the issue. The camera does not show Mark III or Mark IV when tethered. That might just be a text-based issue over here, perhaps, but it's not anything that I'm aware of. But report it in case it's just a little text string that we're missing. So could be an issue, but just report it, but it's not one I know of. Okay, let's turn the camera on and actually take a picture. So let's turn that on. Let's turn some light on, which should wake itself up in a second. There we go. And let's just quit and start up Capture One, and then camera should pop up. There we go. So we've got a Sony A7R4. By default, we've got support for Canon, Nikon, Sony, Fuji, Phase 1, Leica. By default, all of those cameras should be compatible with Capture One, or at least if they're in the compatible list. If for some reason you're not getting connectivity, have a look in the Capture tab of the preferences and make sure you've got it checked on. Oh, Sigma as well. Sorry, Sigma, forgot about you. Make sure you've got it checked on that you want to connect over USB or wireless or both. There's no need to turn off the other camera manufacturers. There's no conflict. But if for some reason you're not getting a connection, just check that these are ticked on. They should be on by default, but I have seen a couple of cases where they've been ticked off, whether inadvertently or by Capture One. So just check that. In the camera tool, this essentially shows you all the different options or controls or settings that you can change on the camera. So anything that is lit up, like the shutter and aperture down here and so on, is up for grabs. So if I click on the aperture and hit plus, then I'm going to directly control that on the camera. Equally, if I was to go over to my camera, which is literally just out of shot, and made an adjustment, then it would sync back to Capture One. Now, those of you on Canons, Nikons, and so on and so forth, will see a slightly different view here. So on Sony, and this is an example of how camera manufacturers never do anything the same amongst each other. On Sony, we can't tell the camera to set to a particular aperture. We can just tell it to go up or go down. On Canon, Nikon, Fuji, as an example, you can physically go in and select the aperture you want to shoot to. So there are some minor differences between the manufacturers. It's impossible for me to hook up 7 cameras and show you all the minor differences, but just have an explore when you connect your camera. One thing which is very handy is the battery indicator as well, so you can keep an eye on your battery levels. You can also place that up on your toolbar. So if you right click and say customize toolbar, you can find the battery status button and drag that to a point up there. Just a great idea because it means that you can keep an eye on that battery level to make sure it doesn't die off at the critical point. David says, with the new Capture One, does tether capture write to both cards inside the camera as well as the tether computer? So for some compatible Canon cameras, you can go into the camera settings, so it's under here, and then you'll find an option that says write to CF card or memory card at the same time. So if you want that, the ability to write to card and your hard drive at the same time, you can. It's also possible with some Sony cameras. It's also possible with some Fuji cameras. So that it's just literally a setting in the camera. All right, let's take a picture. So I can either take a picture from here, and you're going to see an amazing out of focus, terrible shot in a second, or we can take a picture from the camera itself, and that will arrive into Capture One. Just knocked my camera slightly. Let's pull that back. Let's also focus this so we can see the grandeur of this amazing shoot that I've prepared for you. So let's just take another picture. Okay, so speed of the picture coming in. We're going to fill this glass up for an action shot, exciting at the end, so we can see how live view works and capturing at the same time. So that's why it's currently empty. I'm not just being cheap. So speed of capture depends on a bunch of things. Speed of the connection, so depending on how fast your camera can send that data to Capture One, how fast your computer can deal with that data once it's arrived at Capture One. So whether that's, you know, writing to SSD or traditional hard drive, how fast your computer is, and so on. But these are relatively big files. So if we look at this in Finder, so these are 122 meg files, and you'll see if I just shoot a quick volley of pictures. So I'm just shooting off a bunch of shots. Then you'll see those pictures coming relatively quickly. Now if I just do a few more, so shoot a bunch, you see these little orange dots here. This is how many pictures are coming down the USB into Capture One. Some manufacturers or camera models can't show us that. They can only show us there are some pictures coming, but not how many. But that's a really nice indicator, knowing, okay, one picture's coming, and then it's ready in Capture One. Or if I just do 2 clicks, you can see 2 pictures coming down the pipeline. Okay, let me just check my notes to make sure I haven't forgotten anything. No, okay. So in summary, depending on the camera model, depending on the manufacturer, you'll find a certain amount of options here in terms of what we can control from the camera. You'll see more settings in the camera settings tool over here. And again, depending on the camera model and manufacturer, this might be a very long list, or it might be a shorter list in this case. But the essential ones are generally there across all those manufacturers. All right, couple of other things to note up in the camera menu up here. If you ever see these guys hanging out on the front of your picture and you don't know what the heck is going on, that is composition mode. So composition mode is a very useful feature that allows you to shoot. So let me just shoot a couple. Take note of the current file number here. So I shot 2 pictures. Let's shoot 2 more. Like so. Notice that this number isn't changing. So composition mode allows you to shoot and fix your composition, hence the name, but it doesn't write anything to hard drive. So please, please, please don't do an entire shoot on composition mode, because nothing will be saved to your hard drive. That's why we have these big warning symbols all over the top. So if you accidentally enable that by clicking or a shortcut, you can find it up in the camera menu. One other feature which is less useful now because the speed of computers has improved so much, and also the performance of Capture One, is when do we want to show you the new capture. So what happens is, if we take a picture now, so I can do Command K or Control K on my keyboard as a shortcut, you'll see this picture pop in and then it blinks slightly. There's like a low resolution version before the final one comes in. If you like, you can say, I want to see the picture straight away before Capture One has applied any of its adjustments, color management, and all of that kind of stuff. On my computer, you won't see any difference between this two because it can assemble the picture so quickly, it won't really notice. The only benefit, or I guess option here, which is useful, is to turn this to never. If you want to stop the distraction of people looking at Capture One whilst you're taking pictures. So now if I shoot a bunch of shots, they're going to load up here, sorry, just behind me. So if I make myself a bit smaller, they're going to load up here behind me, but they're not auto selected. So if you don't want to distract a model, if you don't want people crowding around the computer, then you can stop those new captures popping up automatically. Also, if you're wondering why that's not happening, you've probably changed this feature excuse me, without realizing. All right, so typical workflow for most people in Capture One is that you take a shot, you make some adjustments, and you want those to carry over to the next picture. So how does that work? So I'm just going to mess up the white balance for a second and just take a capture, because what we should do is we're going to throw, so you know, the start of the shot, it could be that, okay, we haven't got a good white balance, we're messing around with our lighting and so on, so we're going to put our grey card into the shot. I assume that's in the shot. Take a picture, Command K on the keyboard. There's my grey card, just about in the photo, that's good enough. Let's pull that back out. And we're going to white balance that. So we're going to grab the white balance picker here, or we could also grab it from the white balance tool. It's the same one. So it's just here for convenience. And then we're going to white balance like so. Take another picture. And what you'll see is that white balance is then carried over to the next shot. And if I was to do some adjustments, let's polish this turd, as we say, of a photo. So let's crop in a little bit like so. Oh, maybe we could use our keystone sliders, because the can is not quite vertical. So let's do a massive cheat like so. Now let's just adjust the crop a bit more. So we can do a big cheat like that. We could add in some other adjustments. So let's auto our levels for fun. Pull those in a bit more, add a bit more contrast. Let's throw in some vignetting and a bit more contrast and some clarity, why not? So we've done quite a few adjustments there. So typically we would want those to carry over to the next shot. And that's all controlled by next capture adjustments, like so. So by default, if I now take another picture, let's take one, click, all those adjustments that I've just done are carried over to the next picture, which is generally how most of you, I would assume, are going to want to work. If you want to control that, you've got some options down here. So we've got copy from last, which is the default. We can say copy from primary, which is quite a handy feature, because let's say if you shot a few pictures, you're trying to decide on a look, or color grading look, you might say, okay, this is the look we're going for. So I'm going to say copy from primary, because this is a primary select. And if I take a picture now, you'll see it's going to give me my ugly, badly, white balance picture. If I now choose this one and say copy, or sorry, shoot, it's now going to copy from primary, and I can switch this back to copy from last. So always the last picture taken is what this means. Not the last picture you've got selected, the last picture you took. Last picture you selected would be copy from primary. But we can also pick out specific ones from the last picture, specific ones from the primary, and so on. But I'm pretty sure most of you are going to go with this. One little tip, if you are shooting overhead, if you're shooting overhead like this, sometimes the camera's rotational sensor can get confused and you end up with pictures rotated incorrectly, or they perhaps jump from picture to picture. The orientation is moving. So we can force Capture One into a particular orientation. So if I say 90 degrees, then it's going to be on its side like so. Or we can say default, which is essentially use the camera's internal rotation center to figure out what way the picture should be. Okay. Oh, I just messed up my crop a little bit. Let's pull that back out. Like so. So you can work nice and quickly like this. As I said, the standard thing is generally copy from last. Sorry, missed the start. Are you wireless? No, I'm shooting tethered. As I explained at the start, it's a bit tricky to shoot wirelessly and transmit a live stream at the same time because we want a wired network for stability. What I'll do is once this recording is finished doing its thing tomorrow, I'll add some links on where you can find out about wireless tethering. Wireless tethering for Nikon coming soon, possibly. As I said at the start, we're working on a few other things to improve wireless connectivity, but we appreciate that Nikon is obviously a popular option as well. Michael, if I lose the tether and try to restart, Capture One has a meltdown causing me to have to remove the SD card, restart camera in order to connect. Please give me reconnect tether tips. Shouldn't really need to do any of that, Michael. What I would say with the SD card side of things, if you're not shooting to the SD card as well, take it out. And the reason for that is the curious thing on Mac OS. When you connect a camera, it actually sees it as an external hard drive and it tries to index the contents of that drive. Now it gives itself a very short window to do that, and if it doesn't complete within a certain time, it actually blocks the USB connection. So if you're not actually shooting to the SD card at the same time, if your camera doesn't let you do that, take it out. And then that way you should just be able to unplug, replug. But also if you're having that slight reliability issue of reconnection, I would also look at the length of your USB cable, try a different USB cable, and also on the computer itself, it could be a borderline power issue as well. So if you're having those disconnections, then depending on the age of your laptop, so if I go back a few years to my 2018 MacBook Pro, that flatly refused to tether a camera on one side of the computer. So it was fine on the left-hand side, but it was no good on the right-hand side because the USB buses were actually slightly different. So I would say, Michael, if you're losing the tether, you should never lose the tether, really. If you're losing the tether at some point, you've got instability on the USB connection. It should be stable all day, every day. So if that's happening, look at cables, look at shorter cables, look at a powered USB hub. So instead of relying on the computer's USB power, get yourself a separate good quality hub, not a $5, you know, cheapy version. Get a decent external hub which has its own power source to take the stress off the computer, but you should really not be losing the tether connection at all. Okay, check questions over here. Paul says, I noticed there's no native support for Nikon wireless as yet. Is it possible to send the images to a watch folder for Capture One? Yeah, if you send the folders to a Capture One watch folder, what you can do in the camera menu is select the hot folder, so a watch folder, and then it means that when pictures arrive into that folder, they pop up automatically in Capture One. So if you tell your wireless software of whatever camera manufacturer to deliver pictures to the capture folder and then select the capture folder as the hot folder, they will automatically update in Capture One. Okay, so now let's switch. So we've shot loads of stuff in our lighting test, so we should be happy with our lighting, amazing lighting and composition and so on. So now we can shoot for real. So we're going to go to shot one and we're going to say right click, set as capture folder. As soon as I do that, the little capture icon switches over. So now if we look in our lighting test folder, we can see all the pictures that we just took. If I take a picture now, like so, here comes my picture. Notice that it has the same adjustments, so that's a little bit of a warning slash caveat because we're on copy from last, so it's going to copy the adjustments from the last picture that we took. Okay, that's a good way to think about it. So if you've only done a few subtle adjustments, excuse me, if you've only done a few subtle adjustments, I've seen a few people get caught up in that they're now thinking they're at default when they've actually got a minor adjustment in there, and then their lighting and adjustments are pulling against that. So when you switch capture folder, if you do want to go back to 0, just hit the reset button before you start carrying on. Now going back to the discussion of should I reset my counter? which David was talking about earlier. So I personally don't do it. And mostly because I know sometimes I'll remember and sometimes I'll forget. And I'll get some collections nicely starting at 0, and I'll get some collections which I've forgotten and they're starting at some other arbitrary number. So I prefer to let the numbering just flow from capture folder to capture folder. If it's a requirement of your client, like numbering system and so on, then yes, you can go here and you can say reset capture counter. If you don't have to do it, I would say don't, because at some point you will forget if you're like me. If you want to make it a little bit quicker, you can say edit keyboard shortcuts. You can set up a couple of shortcuts. So if I type in capture, you can set a shortcut to set the capture folder. So I've got Option Command C. And you can also set up, if you wanted to, if I type in reset, you can set up a shortcut to reset the counter. So instead of having to right click and click, you could simply click on the folder you want to be the capture folder and then use your shortcut. So if I just use my keyboard shortcut, I can switch the folder quite nicely. If I use my reset shortcut, then I can reset the counter. So as I said, I don't tend to do it. Okay, so we're now in the shot 1 folder, and notice that our naming has changed automatically. Brilliant, that was something I didn't have to remember to do myself. So it was all automatic. So let's take another shot, like so. So I'm just going to rattle off a few of these, purely for when we come to the export side of things. I want to have a few pictures in there to go through a little bit of a workflow. So let's just take a few more pictures. Let's look at live view. So this button here. So we're going to start our live view, and that gives us a live output directly from the camera, which, again, depending on which manufacturer you have, and bless the manufacturers, they don't want to all do it in the same way, we're going to see a little bit of variation in the tools and adjustments, or sorry, tools that are available to me. So live view has a pretty good frame rate, again, depending on the camera. So if I just stick my Wacom pen in this glass, you can see that it updates relatively quickly. So this means I can make some minor adjustments to my composition, like so, very nicely. Especially good if your camera is inaccessible, trying to peer down the viewfinder at the top of, you know, a bunch of ladders or whatever isn't very useful. Live view makes this a lot less stressful. You'll see here under camera focus, we've got a few options here. Now on Sony, unfortunately, the only thing I can ask the camera to do is to autofocus. Canon and Nikon and so on, and some Leica camera lenses, not all lenses, we can adjust the focus by pressing these buttons, which is really nice for still life critical focus. You'll see a zoom slider up in the top right hand corner, and once again manufacturer dependent. Some cameras let you zoom in here, other cameras like the A7R4, if I physically start adjusting the focus, then I can see on screen like so, and I can move around, navigate using the camera's controls. But it means if I do want to nail focus in a particular spot, then I can do so. But certainly if your camera allows you to do this electronically by pressing the arrows, it's a really super nice feature. So unfortunately, it's not something we can access on Sony cameras. We can't physically tell the camera to rotate the lens, unfortunately. Otherwise, you'll still see we've got all our camera controls. We can take a picture whilst we're in live view, which is super nice. So if you've got your live view on a separate screen, you can keep live view running if you wish, whilst you're in that composition phase. Is there a quality penalty with live view? Maybe, depending how heat efficient your camera is, you might find it gets warmer. It will cut off after 30 minutes. If you do want to keep your live window open, you can just pause using this button in the top left-hand corner and then play once more. But mirrorless cameras are kind of pretty used to having this constant output of data from the sensor, so it's not so much of an issue. But it will shut down after 30 minutes, and then you have to start it again. We're going to look at this very useful tool called overlay. So if we go to my desktop for a second, and let's just find a transparent PNG, and we're going to drag and drop it over here. Doesn't have to be a PNG, it can be a JPEG, it can be a TIFF, I think even a RAW file works. But essentially what allows you to do is, if you're working like with food packaging or a magazine cover or something like that, you can drop in your overlay and say to your client, here is how it's going to look. Of course, they're going to be super impressed with the work I've created here. But it's, you know, it's really useful for those alignment purposes. Packaging, magazine layouts, double page spreads, if you're trying to fit work into, you know, a magazine layout. This is just a great way to visualize it. It's available in live view, and it's also available in the viewer of Capture One as well. So if you're not a fan of live view or don't want to use it, you can still use overlay on the main viewer in Capture One as well. Excuse me. Now the quality of live view wholly depends on your camera. So if it's an older camera, you know, like an older Nikon D800 or something like that, then the quality of live view won't be as nice as this Sony, as an example. So we pull out the best live view that we can, but we're limited by what the camera supplies. Okay, so that's live view. We're going to shoot with live view in a second. Let's just take a few more of these. I am in my shot one folder because we're going to do a couple of selects in a minute. So let's just crack off a few of those. So now we've got, you know, plenty of pictures coming in, as you can see. And now, excitement, we're going to go to shot 2, set that as the capture folder. Let's just bang off a quick shot, like so. You can, if you want to, got a few options. You can also drag a capture button to the toolbar. So if we want to capture to the toolbar, then when I can also click this button, and that will give me a shot as well. So what we're going to do now is also a bit of an action shot. And the reason for this is also for our selection process, and then subsequently our export process. Because ideally what we want to do, if we look at our session, and this is just a demo, so of course I'm not going to shoot the quantity that you're going to do, but let's imagine if you've got 10 different folders here of 10 different fashion looks or products or something like that. We want a really efficient way to be able to choose those final pictures and export them with the minimum amount of physical labor that I need to do. So I don't want to be sitting in the computer for a long time. I want to use all the power and availability of Capture One to automate as much as possible. So let's open a beer. It's always good words. So we have beer, we have a beer opener, and I'm going to pour it into this and shoot with live view at the same time. Now the benefit of this, of course, is that with live view running, we can determine exactly when I need to press the button. So bear with me and let's see how it goes. So you can see there's my, you know, in the live view. So if I start pouring and making a big mess, so I'm just going to shoot a bunch of pictures so I can watch my live view at the same time. Nice, super frothy. Obviously we would probably do this a little bit better, but like so. So live view doesn't prevent me from taking a picture. You might find on cameras with mirrors that there's going to be a delay because it needs to pop the mirror up, take the shot, and so on, depending on the camera model. Now, because this is a mirrorless camera and the sensor is pretty modern and sophisticated, there's not really much of a disadvantage in shooting with live view. But some performance might vary, but certainly if you're doing something which has, you know, an action element to it, so I'm just shooting a few more pictures now, then it's a really big benefit. Okay. A couple of overlay questions. PNG only, I thought. JPEG, no transparency. JPEG doesn't have transparency. You can use a JPEG overlay, but if it's important to be able to see through the overlay, then it makes sense to use a PNG, but it's not, you know, a requirement. Paul is asking, can you use the overlay to superimpose an already captured image file over the live view image to assist with image alignment matching? Yes, that's also a brilliant use of overlay. It wasn't the intention of the overlay tool, but I've seen that used, you know, several times. So let's take this scenario of my amazing shot. Let's say for the 360 Brewing Company, we wanted to produce an identical set of pictures of can and glass. You know, so they all look nice on the e-commerce site, so they're all aligned perfectly well. There's nothing to stop me grabbing a JPEG export of this, dropping it in as an overlay and making sure everything has aligned. I've seen it used on sportswear shoots for this reason. So having runners running across, you know, action wise, and then fitting the trainer, you know, in exactly the right spot. Or I've seen athletes running across in their own trainers and then an assistant standing in the shoe which has to be on the athlete, but it doesn't fit the athlete's foot in the right spot for the actual product shot of that shoe. And then it can be photoshopped in afterwards. That was a really great use of overlay because the Olympic, I was on set and the Olympic runner couldn't wear the new shoe because it didn't fit them, and they're not going to risk damaging their body and feet by wearing a shoe that doesn't fit. So they ran back and forth in their own shoes, and then the picture that was chosen to be the final one was used as an overlay, so the assistant could kind of stand there in the right position with this shoe on their foot to then capture that. So overlay has a couple of great uses for that as well. Natalie says, I'm thirsty now. Well, now it's not 9 o'clock in the morning. When I did this the first time round, I can actually drink this one because breakfast beer isn't my thing. Okay, so now we should have a bunch of pictures in the background here. Oh, look, I spilt some as well. Shocking behavior. So what I can do is, and when we go through our, you know, quick selection process, so we do that now, generally what I'm doing, if you can see my keyboard, we've got right and left keys on my cursor keys, and we can whiz through nice and quickly as well. And then I've got my numerical keys on my keypad set up to do 7 is green, so you can see the color tag change down here. 7 is green, 8 is yellow, 9 is red, 6 removes the color tag. So I can go through and think, okay, well, let's grab one of these. So let's make that green, let's grab that one, let's have this one, let's have this one. I can thoroughly recommend the 360 Brewing Company as well. They didn't not sponsor this live stream, but they're a very nice bunch of people. Okay, so now we've got a few selections in there as well. So that's how I find, you know, a good speedy way to do it is cursor keys, numerical keypad, because you can reach everything with one hand. So if I hide my browser for a second, or sorry, hide the viewer, you can see we've got a few green pictures here. If we go back to our shot 1, did we select any here? No, let's just pick a couple of pictures. I know they're all the same, but for the selection process, I want you to see something, and let's just pick a couple out of lighting test as well for the sake of it. Okay, so if you remember, going back 30 minutes or so, we set up these session albums to start with. So if I look in first picks, I'm going to see all those pictures with the green tag. So that was from lighting test, you can see them there, from shot 1 and from shot 2. So these are all the shots which between me and my client, we think these are going to be the best pictures. Although at least it's our initial pick. So now we can go through and think, okay, out of all of these, which ones are going to make the final cut? So again, going back to my keyboard, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is star rating. So if out of these ones, let's make this one a 5-star. Let's just grab a couple, so I'll make that a 5-star. Out of shot 1, let's grab this one. And then out of the finals, let's grab this one and that one. Oh, it's got a bit of a dribble on it. Doesn't do well to miss the glass, eh? And that one. So now we've gone through, and if we look in this selection, this will show me my final picks. So that was the green tag and 5 stars. So we've got 1 from lighting test, we've got 2 from shot 1, and we've got 3 from shot 2. So a few different selections. So now, of course, we want to export these out and then deliver to our client. Before we do that, Paul was checking, I assume that you can reduce the opacity to assist alignment. Yeah, in terms of overlay, let's just open this picture. You'll find the overlay tool down here. So if I turn my overlay on, where is it? It's over here. So if I turn my overlay on and it's not transparent, then we can just rack back the opacity like so. So yes, you can. So JPEGs, PNGs, TIFF files, RAW files, I can't remember, can all be drag and dropped on as an overlay. But it's a super nice feature. Think we are up to date with questions. Yes. I saw a question about Capture One Live. That was from Mary. So Mary, if you go onto our YouTube channel and find the tutorials and watch the one on Capture One Live. That should fix you. Okay. Without setting up Capture One Live now, and it's going a little bit off tangent. So just have a look on our tutorials for Capture One Live, and that goes through that process. All right, so now we want to export our pictures. So the wrong way to do it would be, let's imagine we've got 20 different folders here. So the wrong way to do this would be to go to my shot, filter by green or 5 stars or whatever, select all, export the pictures, go to my next folder, filter by green or whatever my criteria is, export, and so on. Now, if you've got 10, 20, 50 folders, that's going to get pretty boring and laborious quickly. But I can see there could be a case for, well, I want to keep my exports separate. I don't want them all in one massive output folder. That's going to be confusing. Don't worry, we can automate that. So we're in our final set of wonderful pictures. We've got 6 pictures that we want to send to our client. So let's select all of these, and we're going to say export. And before we do anything fancy, if you like, let's just show you, if you like, the basic scenario. So let's say we want to export these as a JPEG high quality. So I'm going to turn that recipe on. That's the only recipe I've got selected. Nothing else is going to happen. And if I say export 6 pictures, like so, let's just go to my output. They're all going to arrive in the output folder, like so. So that's the most, basic form of export you can do in Capture One. So by default, they're all going to get delivered to that point. But that's not super sophisticated for us, because what I want to do is to be able to export a JPEG, export a TIFF at the same time, sort them automatically into the folders where they came from, and let's rename them at the same time as well. So we're going to do all of that, and this could be 600 pictures, which we could do automatically. So let's go back into export, and we do it from scratch, and we set up 2 new export recipes so you can see the process. So let's say plus, and we're going to say new recipe, and the first thing I said I wanted was a TIFF full size. So we need to make that TIFF, and we're going to have, let's have 16-bit, why not? And it's going to be uncompressed, and it's going to be Adobe RGB. Great. Now, we want to make another recipe, and this is going to be a JPEG for proofing or whatever. So this is going to go to my designer. They're going to look at the shots and see how it's going to lay out on the website, as an example. So this is going to be a JPEG. We're going to turn the quality down a bit. It's going to be sRGB, and we're going to scale it down. We're only going to have it, 1500 pixels across. That's plenty big enough for our website. Now, interestingly, when I switch between these different recipes, let's look at 100%. So 100%, this viewer is essentially proofing exactly what this picture is going to look like. When I go to my JPEG recipe, the picture is going to shrink because it's simulating how it's going to look as it's resized. And as we, excuse me, as we shrink a picture or enlarge a picture, it has a negative impact on the sharpness. So what we can do automatically is ask Capture One to add some output sharpening for screen. So that's going to compensate for that change in size and improve that. Oh, sorry, wrong view of the keyboard there. So we've got our TIFF full size and we've got our JPEG for proofing, like so. Now, if I was to stop there, let's go into let's delete the contents of the output folder. Let's export these 6 images once more and see what happens. So if we go to our, where are we? Tethered PM output. So we can see the pictures going in. We've got my JPEGs and TIFFs like so, but they're all jumbled together. So if you imagine I had 600 outputs I needed to do, I've then got to sort by JPEG, sort by TIFF, and deliver those to the right people. Now I don't want to do that. My time is valuable. So what we're going to do is ask Capture One to do that for me. So back into my export window. Helps if we select some pictures to export. And what we're going to do is we're going to tell Capture One to automatically sort them into a subfolder. Now, if you remember right back at the start, we used tokens to build our naming convention. We're going to use tokens to build our export process. So if I click on this little button here, we're going to grab a token and we're going to find the one which has a very curious name of session subpath and add that in there. And what session subpath does is look at the folder that the picture is sitting in and creates that same folder in the output folder. So that's going to be lighting test, shot 1, shot 2. It's going to build those automatically. So I'm going to do the same for JPEG proofing. Now, if you know the name of the token, you can just start typing it and it will pop up. So now we're going to use session subpath. Great. So let's see what happens if we do the same thing. So our output folder is empty. So let's say export 6 images. So now in our output folder, great, we've got lighting test. There's my JPEG and TIFF. We've got shot 1. There's my JPEG and TIFF. Shot 2. There's my JPEG and TIFF. Brilliant, that's better. But I still have my JPEGs and TIFFs all in the same folder. So I'm still going to have to do a bit of manual labor, which we don't want. So let's improve on that with one final step. So going back into the export window, if I click on this little token here, we're going to say, hey, Capture One, session subpath is great, but we want them divided up by JPEG and TIFF beforehand. So in front of session subpath, I'm going to use the token called recipe name and dump that up there. So now Capture One will make a folder based on the name of my recipe, TIFF full size, and then sort them into their different folders. Now we could do it the other way around. We could have session subpath recipe name, but this way makes more sense. So let's say OK, and we have to do the same for this recipe. Recipe name, so if I start typing it, we can do so, and then we need our little / in between that. The / means make another drop, or sorry, a line in the folder tree, if you like. So make the recipe name and then make a subset of folders like so. You'll see when we hit export. Is my output folder empty? Yes. So let's say export 6 images. Sorry, that's just hiding behind me down here, export 6. So now if we go to my output folder, we've got, here are all my full size TIFFs. There's the lighting test one, there's shot 1, there's shot 2. Here's all my JPEGs, there's the lighting test one, there's shot 1, and there's shot 2. So that's made us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 folders automatically. Now if you wanted to do that manually and you've got 600, 800, 1,000 pictures, completely feasible to do, you're going to spend all night sitting in front of Capture One. Nobody wants to do that. So use the tools that are in there to help this export process. Now we've just really scratched the surface of what's possible with exporting. If you want to make further folders, let's say we've used different color tags, you could divide them up by color tags. You could divide them up by star rating. You could divide them up by camera serial number if you'd use 2 different cameras. There's tokens for everything pretty much. But just that simple one of session subpath and recipe name It's just a really nice way to output your shots and not get mixed up. As I said, we could rename as well. So if I just delete those folders and then do our last one, which is export once more. And down here you see we've got naming, we've got image name. If you wanted to, you could add the recipe name token on the end of that. So if I do the same for each recipe name token like so, let's export these again. You'll now see that it's got the recipe name in the file name itself. So I know instantly when I look at this, oh, okay, that's my proofing JPEG. Or if I look at this one, oh, okay, that's my full-size TIFF. So use those tokens to help rename automatically as well, because if some stupid client, not that all clients are stupid, but if you do have a stupid client and they've completely screwed up your folder structure, at least you know, oh, what's this picture? Okay, that's the full-size TIFF. Okay, that's the final picture. Okay, last couple of questions, and then we will show you, which will take 1 minute, to save all of this as a template. Let's see, I think we're good for questions there. Perfect, and we're good for questions there. Okay, so we've done a lot today in terms of setting up our session, setting up our naming convention, setting up our session albums, and there's probably more stuff which I've forgotten as well. Now let's say tomorrow we've got another client, we've got another shoot. To go through doing all this again is not very efficient. So let's automate that as well. So all I need to do is say File, Save as Template. So sorry, that was a bit quick. File, Save as Template down here. So I'm going to call this my 2-shot template. Leave it in saving in this template folder because Capture One will know how to access it. But this will come up automatically. You don't have to move it, change it, just save it where Capture One wants to. Now if we close this session down and then we're going to say File, New Session. We've got a new day today. So today we are shooting whatever. We're shooting clothing lookbook. Like so, and by default template will say blank, but we want to use my 2-shot template like so and say okay. Now within an instant you can see we've got my smart albums there, first picks and final picks. We've got our 3 folders there. The error I made when I saved the template is that I should have set this one as capture folder because we always want lighting test as the capture folder. If we go into the tether setup, we can see we've got our naming convention all set up as well. Looking in our finder, if we go back to clothing lookbook, this is what we just made. There's my lighting test, shot 1, shot 2. So we've set all of that up in the blink of an eye. And when I would, want to maximize the potential of that, I could have different templates for different clients, different number of shoot folders, and so on. So don't forget that that facility exists, because that will also mean you've got consistency in your workflow. So you'll have consistency in those folder setups, and you'll have consistency in your naming of your photos too, which is very important for lots of reasons. And also if you use the export recipes, go away next capture naming. If you use the export recipes, then you've got consistency in how you export and how your exports are named as well. And using all of those tools ultimately means that there's less work for you to do. Because as I said, sitting in front of a computer, selecting pictures, setting them to different folders or sending them to different folders manually is a huge waste of your time, and it's, not necessary. Okay, I think that brings us to the end. So we're overrun a little bit of time, but as you can see, the actual capture part, this bit, pressing the button and taking a picture, that bit's pretty easy. And if you, didn't know Capture One at all, you could connect your camera in and take a picture and haha, I have a picture in Capture One, fantastic. But all those other little nuances of, naming conventions, folders, smart collections, exporting is what makes everything much more efficient and saves a whole bunch of your time, which is what it's all about. Okay, last couple of questions. It's 6 p.m. in Paris, time for an apéro. I'm definitely going to drink that as soon as we finished. Which Wacom am I using? This is quite an old one now, but it's still pretty great. It's a Intuos Pro, medium size one. Personally, for photography, I don't think you need to go any bigger, because then there's quite a lot of arm fatigue having to move over the surface. So medium or small works just fine, in my opinion. If you were illustrating, you'd probably want bigger real estate, but for me that works out quite nicely. Will Nikon tethering be supported, wireless tethering be supported at all? I can't say for definite and when, but we know it's a popular choice. So we're certainly working hard to increase, the compatibility of wireless tethering. But right now you can shoot with Sony and Canon wireless. Setup wise, it's both different manufacturers, again, different methods of setting up. Sony is actually pretty easy. You either connect it to your network and shoot, or you connect it directly to your computer and shoot. Canon, you have to jump through a few more different setup hoops on the back, but it's all documented on our support site, support.captureone.com. Questions are all good there, so I think we are done. So this is going straight to YouTube, so you can rewind it and watch it again now if you wish. So Paul, who was asking that, yeah, it's gone straight to YouTube, so it will be there immediately. I'll trim it down a little bit, but otherwise it will be there straight away. Last question, as you've asked it 4 times, Mario. What's the difference between open with and edit with? Open with simply opens the file into the application of your choice. Edit with exports the file and opens that export into the application of your choice. So open is just an open. Edit with creates an additional file and saves that back to your catalog or session. So that's the difference. Nice one. Mohan says, CR3 format only supported in Capture One 22. It won't be supported in Capture One 21. So if you do want to use the R3, then you do have to update Capture One. So new camera support comes with updates of Capture One. Do you have any recorded session of a loop deck with Capture One? I haven't actually, Keith. I need to get hold of one to give it a try, because I know they've improved the compatibility somewhat. I just haven't had a chance to try it myself. I've used the Monogram kit, which works really nicely, but I've yet to try a loop deck. But that's something for the future. All right, thanks everybody. Don't forget, if you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and that little notification bell, because then whenever we go live you'll get a notification so you don't miss out. So thanks for joining me for today. I hope that was useful. Apologies for the terrible photography, but limited space, lighting and all that stuff. So excuses out the way, but the workflow is the important thing and saving you time. So take care, enjoy the rest of your Thursday night. I'm going to drink that and see you all very shortly. So take care and have a good weekend. Bye.